7 years of a secret marriage. My husband says I'm just the nanny. It was parent-child day at the preschool, and I stood at the school gate waiting for father and son to come out. The teacher glanced at me inquisitively and asked, "And who is this?" My son hesitated, unsure of what to say. My husband, Ethan, answered with a detached tone, "She's the child's nanny." The smile that had been brightening my face froze in the air, hanging there like a fragile ornament about to shatter. 7 years of a secret marriage, and suddenly I felt utterly exhausted. "Ethan, let's get a divorce. I'll give you back your freedom." Ethan loosened his tie, his voice tinged with irritation. "Have you thought it through? Don't regret it later." "Don't worry. I won't regret it." Ethan frowned, his usual cold demeanor returning. "You can't take Lucas with you. He's a Lynn by blood." I shook my head, my voice calm but resolute. "I never planned to fight you for custody. He's always been closer to you than to me." Ethan was right. Lucas bore the Lynn family's name, their blood, and even their temperament. Selfish, aloof, and defiant. Hearing my words, Ethan's tone softened slightly. "Olivia, I never meant to hurt you. Yesterday was parent-child day, and there were a lot of people at the gate. We had to stick to our prenuptial agreement." Even now, he thought my resentment stemmed solely from the secret marriage arrangement. Yesterday at around 4 in the afternoon, I was waiting outside Lucas's preschool. Normally, I would sit in the car and wait, but since they were attending a parent-child event, they came out later than usual. Bored, I decided to get out and stretch my legs. Walking around the entrance, I spotted Lucas being led by his teacher, but Ethan wasn't by his side. I instinctively reached out to take Lucas's hand, but the teacher gave me a wary look. She bent down and asked him, "Lucas, do you know her? You can't leave with strangers, okay?" Lucas hesitated, looking at me but saying nothing. Ethan appeared out of nowhere, his voice calm yet cutting. "She's the nanny I hired. I'm often busy with work, so I needed someone at home to take care of the child. It gives me peace of mind." Lucas nodded in agreement. "Teacher, she's my nanny." The words I was about to say were caught in my throat, and the smile on my face froze, hanging there like an unspoken plea. Over the years, I had grown numb to the various roles they assigned me, sometimes a cousin, sometimes a distant friend. It was like enduring a lash every day. Eventually, you grow accustomed to the pain. But this time the lash struck my heart. That evening, for the first time, I didn't prepare Ethan's bathwater, nor did I read Lucas his bedtime story, even as he cried late into the night. Ethan pushed open the guest room door, his deep voice laced with anger. "Olivia, you're crossing the line. Have you forgotten your place? You want to be Mrs. Lynn? I married you, gave you a child. What more do you want?" Yes, what more could I want? I was simply overcome by the sheer emptiness of it all. I had known Ethan for 10 years, been married to him in secrecy for 7, yet I remained an invisible shadow in his life. I was only Ethan's personal assistant, Lucas's live-in nanny, never Olivia. And I was so tired. I signed the divorce papers calmly and went upstairs to pack my suitcase. Ethan, confused, tugged at his tie. "Olivia, are you sure about this? Once you step out that door, you're no longer Mrs. Lynn." I paused, turning to meet his gaze with cold detachment. "I've never been more sure. I've kept you bound for 7 years. Now I'm setting you free." He yanked off his tie and tossed it onto the sofa, his voice brimming with impatience. "Fine, as long as you're sure. I just don't want you coming back later playing games." I took one last look at the house where I had once dared to hope for happiness. "Once the papers are finalized, let me know when to meet at the Civil Affairs Bureau. I won't be coming back." As I reached the front door, Ethan followed me out, handing me a set of keys. "You don't know anyone here. Where can you go? Take the villa on the east side. It's yours now." Without looking back, I replied, "Let Lucas have it." Consider it my parting gift to him. As for me, don't worry. I'm not going to end up on the streets. At the corner, I spotted Lucas standing in the shadows. He looked eerily calm for a 5-year-old. I sighed. Lucas, no one will be there to pick the seeds out for you anymore. Be careful when you eat grapes. Don't choke. He loved grapes. When he was little, he once choked on one and had to be rushed to the hospital. Since then, I'd always removed the seeds for him, one by one. After saying this, I climbed into the rideshare car waiting by the curb, not sparing them another glance. 3 hours later, I arrived back in the small town I hadn't seen in years. Pushing open the creaky wooden door, I was greeted by the ghost of my past, memories rushing back in waves. It had been 10 years since the accident that took my parents' lives. Grandma had fallen ill from grief, and I'd taken her away from this little courtyard, heading to the city for treatment. I couldn't afford the hospital bills and had collapsed, sobbing, in front of the hospital. Ethan had paid the fees and asked if I was willing to become his personal assistant. At 19, I didn't even know what that entailed, but out of gratitude, I nodded desperately. Even so, Grandma didn't make it. After her passing, I moved into Ethan's villa. That house was enormous, so big that the sound of rain in the middle of the night scared me. He had held me then, whispered softly, "Don't cry. From now on, it's just us against the world." And from that moment, he took residence in my heart. If he was happy, I was happy. If he was upset, I would find a way to make him feel better. Even if the name he murmured in his sleep wasn't mine. Even if there was an old, yellowed photo album tucked away in his drawer. For his sake, I was willing to pretend I didn't know a thing. The girl in the photos was Grace. She had dimples that lit up her face when she smiled, always wearing a white dress that made her look as radiant as an angel. The first time I saw the pictures, it all clicked. No wonder Ethan insisted I only buy white dresses, only wear sneakers, and always tie my hair into a ponytail. He wanted me to be Grace's shadow. The album chronicled their most beautiful moments together. In every picture, Grace's smile was like the sun, bright and dazzling. Even I couldn't help but feel drawn to her warmth. But the last photo was different. It showed Grace lying in a hospital bed, her body wrapped in bandages, her eyes closed, her face drained of all color. On the back of the photo, there were 4 words written in Ethan's unmistakable handwriting. "Forever missing my love." They must have loved each other passionately. But something happened. Grace was left battered and broken, and she never woke up again. From that day forward, Ethan withdrew into his shell, like a snail retreating into its protective home, shutting everyone else out. Then he met me, just as lonely, just as lost. We clung to each other, offering solace and creating a fragile semblance of a family. 3 years later, I pestered him for a marriage certificate. Ethan, worn down by my persistence, finally gave in. But he made me sign a prenuptial agreement. The most important clause? I was never to call myself Mrs. Lynn in public. At the time, I didn't understand why. But I signed without hesitation. I thought I could warm the ice-cold well that was his heart. What I forgot was that ice doesn't just stay cold. It freezes everything it touches. As the realization hit me, I let out a bitter laugh. What was there left to misunderstand? In Ethan's heart, the title of Mrs. Lynn would always belong to Grace. I wasn't even a stand-in. After hiring workers to renovate the small courtyard, I began tending to the flowers and plants. My grandmother had loved gardening when she was alive. She used to say that watching flowers bloom and wither was the best way to understand the meaning of life. Over 3 days, I transplanted seedlings from the flower market into the yard. I tried to imitate the way my grandmother used to do it, loosening the soil, watering each plant carefully. Just as I was absorbed in the work, my phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice was as cold and detached as ever. "Olivia, where's my new razor? The old one's broken. In the cabinet to the right of the bathroom sink. Just open it and you'll see it." I could hear faint shuffling sounds through the phone, accompanied by the soft thuds of his slippers on the floor. You bought that washing machine just for Lucas. How does it work? His clothes have piled up. I paused for a few seconds before replying. Ethan, the washing machine comes with an instruction manual. If that's not enough, you can call the customer service number. They'll send someone to help. He wasn't expecting my response and hesitated for a moment. All right. Got it. Before he could say anything else, I hung up immediately. After planting the last of the seedlings, I finally had a moment to breathe. I pulled out my phone and blocked all of Ethan's contact information. We were divorced now. It was best to cut all ties. In the days that followed, I spent my time in the courtyard, sipping tea and admiring the flowers. Whenever I closed my eyes to rest, though memories from the past would flash through my mind. Back when my parents were still alive, they'd take me up the hill to pick fruit. Later, when my grandmother fell ill, relatives and friends avoided us like the plague, afraid of being burdened. And then there was the day Lucas was born. His wrinkled little face was the most precious sight to me. I forced my eyes open, realizing I was drenched in cold sweat. Reaching for my cup of tea, I tried to steady my nerves. Then my phone rang again. The caller ID showed it was from City A. It was probably Ethan. He had been changing numbers to call me one after another ever since I blocked him. I ignored it, hung up, and blocked the new number. To my surprise, a text message followed. Hello. This is Lucas's kindergarten teacher. We notified you last week about today's inspection, where all children are required to wear their uniforms and bring their school badges. However, Lucas said you couldn't find them and he doesn't know where they are. Would it be possible for you to bring them over? I sighed, exasperated. I couldn't understand what was going on with those two. Before leaving, I had told Ethan clearly. All of Lucas's belongings were in his bedroom's walk-in closet. I had labeled every drawer and shelf, organizing everything meticulously. All he needed to do was put in a little effort, and he'd find whatever he was looking for. Why was he still coming to me for help? I dialed the number from the message. Hello, teacher. I'm sorry, I thought it was a spam call and hung up. My apologies. It's all right, no problem. Could you bring Lucas's uniform and badge over? I let out a small sigh. Teacher, could you please put me on speaker so Lucas can hear me? Of course, one moment. A few seconds later, the teacher spoke again. All right, you can talk now. Thank you, teacher. I didn't hesitate any longer. Lucas, your school uniform is in the 3rd wardrobe, and your school badge is in the 5th drawer. They're all labeled. Ask your dad to bring them to you. I've divorced your father. You said I wasn't your ideal mom, just your nanny. So from now on, don't come to me for anything. I'm not your nanny anymore. Before he could respond, I ended the call abruptly. The courtyard fell silent. Thinking of Lucas as a soft, sweet little boy, a pang of sorrow crept into my heart. When Lucas was just born, he only wanted me. Ethan was afraid of the baby crying and disturbing him, so we stayed at a postpartum care center for 3 months before moving back home. Once we were home, there was no one to help. Every night, I held Lucas in my arms, barely getting 2 hours of sleep. But I can't pinpoint when things changed. He stopped clinging to me at night and started sticking to Ethan instead. All he needed from me was a bedtime story before promptly kicking me out so his dad could tuck him in. Later, he didn't even need me to help him dress or eat. He became so formal with me that it didn't feel like we were mother and son. He didn't even call me mom. At the time, I comforted myself by thinking that kids grow up and develop their own minds. I told myself not to hold on to outdated parenting methods. But now I understand. He didn't change. He was selfish and indifferent at his core, just like Ethan. When they needed me, I had to be there. When they didn't, I was expected to disappear, to be invisible. To them, I wasn't a person with a name or identity. I was their lifelong nanny. The tranquil life in this small town has helped heal my wounds. Tending to my flowers and plants every day keeps my mind too busy to dwell on the past. But it seems that Ethan and Lucas have changed their tune, endlessly calling me over and over. I kept hanging up, blocking their numbers, but they just call me from another one. My phone started ringing again. I was already irritated. When I answered, no one spoke. Suppressing my anger, I demanded, "Ethan, I know it's you. What do you want?" "Olivia," he said softly, "you've gone back to the courtyard, haven't you? I couldn't find you in a city." In 10 years of marriage, he never cared about where I was. During the 3 months at the postpartum care center, he never asked how I was. When I went on a 2-week trip, he never once asked if I was safe. We were like the most familiar strangers living under the same roof. Even when I tried to show concern for him, asking him to drink less, stay up less, or have some stomach-soothing soup, I would only get a cold "noted" in response. Now he acted like the wronged party, as if I were the one who'd betrayed him. "I've been listening to you," he said. "I haven't been drinking, I've been going to bed earlier, and I've been having stomach-soothing soup every day. But I still can't sleep. Lucas keeps waking up in the middle of the night, crying for his mom. He says when you sing lullabies, he's not scared. Can you teach me how to sing them?" A wave of irritation surged through me, burning in my chest. "Ethan, are you suffering from memory loss? We're divorced. Whether you can sleep or sing lullabies has nothing to do with me anymore. With your resources, finding yourself a personal lifestyle assistant should be easy, 10 of them even. So stop bothering me. And if you were truly a competent father, why would the child be crying for his mom? Maybe you should reflect on yourself instead of coming to me. Perhaps you can't adjust to life without me, but Ethan, we're done. Completely done. You and Lucas need to stop disrupting my peace. I don't want any contact with either of you. Do you understand?" On the other end, there wasn't even the sound of breathing. I pressed the red button without hesitation. Thankfully, the mobile service store wasn't far. I went there immediately, bought a new phone, and set up a new number. Over the next few days, I went to every service center in town, updating all my information to my new number. I severed ties with my past world entirely. From now on, I am simply myself. My name is Olivia. I am no longer anyone's nanny, assistant, shadow, or mother. The flowers in my courtyard were in full bloom, breathtakingly beautiful. I entrusted them to my neighbor's care and prepared to embark on a road trip. I got into my newly purchased car, heading to my first destination, Zian. It was a rugged SUV I'd had my eye on for years, priced in the tens of thousands. Back then, I was still learning how to drive, brimming with excitement as I introduced the car to Ethan. All I wanted was a simple car for commuting and taking Lucas to and from places. But all Ethan gave me was a neutral hum, without so much as lifting his gaze. Lucas, with his innocent little face, glanced at me disdainfully. "This car is so embarrassing. I won't sit in something like this. You don't deserve my dad." I froze, never expecting a 3 or 4-year-old to say such a thing. Looking back on that moment now, I finally understand. Ethan's coldness toward me didn't go unnoticed by Lucas. He was young, but he wasn't foolish. As time went on, he only became more like his father, colder and more detached. Why am I still thinking about this? I laughed to myself. I broke free from the cage that bound me for 10 long years. I should breathe in the air of freedom. The people in Xi'an were warm and welcoming, their lively voices filling the streets. At Huaqing Hot Springs, I paused to admire the soothing waters. A little girl, no older than 4 or 5, ran up to me, her Mandarin a little clumsy but endearing. "Miss, can you help me fill this cup with hot spring water? I want to take some home for my mom." I squatted down to take the cup from her tiny hands, glancing back over my shoulder. Her grandmother stood not far away, smiling gently and nodding at me. "Sure, but why isn't your mom here with you?" I asked. The little girl broke into the brightest smile. Grandma said my mom turned into a star in the sky, and when I grow up, I'll get to see her. My heart clenched. I pulled her into a hug. Your mom told me to give you a hug for her, so you could always remember what she feels like. I let her go, turned away to compose myself, and filled the cup with hot spring water. Her grandmother walked over, thanking me repeatedly. I waved it off with a smile, signaling it was no trouble. Just as I was about to leave, the little girl called out to me, "Miss, can I kiss you?" Grandma said I used to kiss my mom on the cheek all the time. I want to give you a kiss so you can bring it to her. A wave of emotion swelled in my chest, and I blinked back sudden tears. I picked her up and planted a soft kiss on her cheek. Your mom secretly asked me to kiss you back. That was her kiss to you. She wrapped her little arms tightly around my neck, burying her face against me. In a muffled voice, she whispered, "Mom, I miss you so much." Her grandmother, eyes glistening with tears, came over to take her from me. Her voice was thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry to trouble you, Sophie. She just misses her mom so much." I shook my head gently. "Let her hold on for a while longer. I've got time, I can leave later." And so, she stayed in my arms as we wandered together from the Huaqing hot springs to the Qin Shi Huang mausoleum, and finally to the terracotta warriors. Their laughter echoed along the way, brightening what might have been a dull solo trip. Eventually, we visited the giant wild goose pagoda, the small wild goose pagoda, the Daming Palace, and the Furong Garden together. On the last evening, Sophie clung to my hand, her eyes brimming with reluctance. "Miss, can I call you Mom? I know my mom's not here anymore. Dad and Grandma told me she's in the sky so I wouldn't feel sad. But I think you're my mom. You look exactly like the mom I see in my dreams." Her grandmother hurriedly pulled Sophie into her arms, clearly embarrassed, and apologized profusely. I parked my car and walked back to them. Taking a piece of paper, I scribbled my phone number and slipped it into the grandmother's bag. "If Sophie ever misses her mom at night, give me a call. I'll tell her a bedtime story and help her fall asleep. Okay?" Sophie's face lit up with joy, nodding so vigorously it seemed like her head might fall off. She kept chanting, "I have a mom now. I have a mom now." Her grandmother, unable to hold back anymore, let tears stream silently down her cheeks. I waved goodbye as I sent them off on their bus back home. See, even after leaving Ethan and Lucas, I'm not completely useless. I could be a good mom, couldn't I? Later, I made my way to Luoyang, where I climbed Laojun Mountain and marveled at the Longmen Grottos. With a reverent heart, I stood in awe of nature's majesty and reflected on humanity's smallness in comparison. Eventually, I traveled further north, ending up in Inner Mongolia. Riding on horseback, the wind rushing past me, I gazed out at the vast grasslands stretching endlessly before me. Suddenly, everything seemed a little less important. And then out of nowhere, I remembered my teenage dream. Back in high school during sophomore year, my classmates and I used to chat about what we wanted to do in the future. When it was my turn, I proudly declared, "I want to plant fruit trees all over the hill behind my house. I'll take care of my parents and grandma, watching the flowers bloom and fall with them all year round, eating sweet fruit every day. Then, I'll make wine from the extra fruit. We can sip it under the moonlight while our dog guards the family." But before I even graduated, I became an orphan. The following decade, I lost myself completely. My life revolved around Ethan and Lucas, leaving no time or space for my own dreams. They never cared what I wanted anyway, but now I finally can. I rushed back to my small hometown, only to find Ethan standing outside my courtyard, with Lucas beside him, his eyes swollen from crying. To say it didn't dampen my spirits would be a lie. In fact, it annoyed me. I brushed past them without even sparing a glance. Was this really necessary? I tried to keep my tone civil even as I kept it cold. Ethan looked at me with a strange expression I couldn't quite read. He stared at me for what felt like an eternity before speaking. Olivia, you're different from before. Lucas, who had been curiously sniffing the flowers and touching the trees, turned to stare at me as well after hearing his dad. I was wearing a floral dress, my hair in a messy bun, and sky-high heels, completely different from the way I used to dress to please him, copying Grace's style. Of course I'm different now. I rolled my eyes internally and looked directly at Ethan. I'm asking you, was this necessary? Coming all the way here? He awkwardly gestured toward Lucas. The kid misses you. He cried himself to sleep. I sighed, exasperated. Ethan, I thought I made myself very clear last time. Why can't you understand? We're over. Done. Do you get that? His hand trembled slightly as he held his water cup, spilling some onto the ground, where it sizzled and bloomed into misty patterns. Olivia, is it because I didn't acknowledge your identity that you want to leave us? He's your own son. Can you really bear to do this? Whether you acknowledge it or not, it doesn't matter anymore. I have my own new life now, and I don't want to go back to the past. Please stop disturbing me. We're not on the same path. I clenched my teeth and said in one breath, including him, Lucas, even his very existence is a mistake. If I could go back 10 years, I'd rather never have met you. After all, he was just a 5-year-old child. My words hurt him and he cried, running into Ethan's arms. I stood up, opened the gate to the small courtyard and said, Go ahead, don't come back. I never want to see you again. Ethan seemed like he wanted to say something, but when he saw my back, he could only lower his head and lead Lucas out. As they passed me, a small hand tugged at the hem of my clothes. I looked down. He seemed to want to call out Mom, but he choked on it, holding back the words. Ethan grabbed his hand and pulled him away. I turned my head, not daring to look back, afraid that I would soften. During my difficult labor, I endured 3 days of pain, but the baby still wouldn't come out. The doctor discovered that the baby was in fetal distress. An emergency C-section was immediately performed. I couldn't wait for the anesthesia to kick in, and the incision was already made. The pain made my entire body tremble uncontrollably, cold sweat pouring down. I was strapped to the operating table, unable to move, and could only scream in agony. The brief surgery felt like an eternity. When I heard Lucas's cry, I felt a huge sense of relief. At that moment, I thought to myself, even if I were to die on that operating table, I would ensure that my child survived. Fortunately, modern medicine saved us and we both came out of it safely. From that day on, I indulged him in everything, treating him as if he were fragile, holding him in my hands, afraid he might break. Before he turned 2, he was indeed closest to me. He would cry endlessly if he didn't see me day or night. But gradually he stopped needing me. He even began to see me as nothing more than a nanny hired by his father, not as his mother. I shook my head, trying to shake off these thoughts, and closed the courtyard gate. Just then my phone rang. A strange number. Hello, is this Miss Olivia? This is Sophie's father, Nathan. She's been asking for you, refusing to eat or sleep. Could you please speak with her? I hummed in response, and then Sophie's soft, sweet voice came through the phone. Mom, it's Sophie. I miss you so much. When will you come to see me? That pang of sorrow hit me again, and I inexplicably felt like crying. Today I finally understood why it was like this. The child, who had never received anything from me, treasured me like a gem. A simple hug could move her so much that she didn't want to let go, calling me Mom over and over. But the child I once valued more than my own life, who should have cherished my love, took it all for granted, seeing my affection as an obligation, and didn't even feel the need to call me Mom. I gently comforted her. Sophie, Mommy has been a little busy recently, but once things settle down, I'll come to see you. You need to be a good girl and listen to Grandma and Daddy, eat well, sleep well, and then Mommy will come soon, okay? I'll listen to Mommy. Yay, Mommy said she's coming to see me. Mommy, I love you. She added a sweet kiss through the phone. Even though it was through the phone, I still felt so happy. The feeling of being needed and valued is truly wonderful. The phone was passed to Nathan. Thank you so much, Miss Olivia. Sophie's mother passed away during childbirth, and every time she cries for her, I'm at a loss. Today, I'm really grateful to you. No need to thank me. If she ever asks for her mom again, feel free to call me. I like her, and I'm happy to be her phone mom. Nathan seemed visibly moved. All right, Miss Olivia, but won't this affect your family and your child? What if they misunderstand? I smiled lightly, my tone casual. I'm single. Sophie can call me anytime. A month later, I became quite close with Sophie's family. They invited me to visit, and since I also wanted to get out for a while, I packed up, got in the car and headed to the next city. Nathan was holding Sophie at the highway entrance, craning his neck to look in my direction. It was a treatment I had never experienced before. In the past, I had been like a stone waiting for my husband, Ethan, not at the company door but at Lucas's kindergarten gate. Even if father and son arrived early, they wouldn't wait for me. They would go on ahead and I would rush to catch up. Did you wait long? It's so hot today. Come on, get in the car. Don't let the child get heat stroke. I quickly opened the back door and let them in. Nathan seemed a little awkward, but Sophie was delighted, shouting that she wanted to sit in the front seat. I want to sit with Mommy. I want to hold Mommy's hand. I want to be with Mommy. I looked at Nathan and said, how about you drive, and I'll sit in the back with Sophie? It seemed like the only option since Sophie was too small for the front seat. On the way, Sophie kept hugging my neck, as if she was afraid that if she let go, I would disappear. I held her gently, singing a lullaby to calm her. When Lucas was a child, he would have trouble sleeping at night, and I would sing these lullabies to help him drift off. Night after night, I sang until dawn. I never imagined those songs would still have a purpose now, but Sophie quickly fell asleep. Seeing this, Nathan couldn't help but have tears well up in his eyes. A man over 6 feet tall, yet here he was showing a tender side. After parking the car, I picked up Sophie and got out. Just as I stood up, Lucas rushed up to me. You're my mom. Why are you holding someone else? Put her down. I won't let you hold anyone else. He tried to pull Sophie away from me, but I stepped aside and he fell to the ground. His palm scraped open and blood started to trickle out. His knees and calves were also scraped. Not far away, Ethan was walking toward us. I quickly handed Sophie to Nathan, saying, you two go inside first. Nathan gave me a worried glance, then quickly scooped Sophie up and hurried upstairs. Ethan sneered as he watched them leave. Is this why you insist on abandoning us just for him? He threw you away so easily, and now you've come this far to play stepmother for someone else. I couldn't be bothered to answer him. You see your son like this, and you still don't rush him to see a doctor, but you have the time to shift the blame onto me? Lucas, with tears brimming in his eyes, looked at me pitifully. Mom, don't you want to hug me? If this had been before, I would have rushed over to comfort him, no matter the distance. But now I just looked coldly at the father and son. I'm not your mom. You don't have a mom anymore. Olivia, Ethan suddenly spoke, what will it take for you to forgive us? We truly know we were wrong. I scoffed. Ethan, can you truly take grace out of your heart and place me there instead? Lucas, can you respect me the way Sophie does, and consider me as your only mother? I really don't understand. Why is it that the things you can't do, you're forcing me to accept? Am I really meant to be bound to you two for a lifetime? Lucas didn't understand what I was saying and looked helplessly at Ethan. Ethan was stunned, his pupils wide in shock. When did you find out about Grace? Did you see that photo album? You probably don't know, but every night in your dreams you call for Grace. I don't mind who resides in your heart, but why should I sacrifice for your love? Why should I carry all of this weight? Finally, I let all my grievances out, and the suffocating feeling in my chest disappeared. Ethan slowly lowered his head, exhausted, and leaned against the wall, sliding down to the floor. Grace. She died 10 years ago. I know. Do you know why she died? Ethan's voice became more sorrowful. That year my business had just started to take off, and the rival company sent people to destroy it. Grace locked me in the basement to protect me, while she went out to face those people's beatings and humiliation alone. When the police arrived, she could barely speak, already on the brink of death. It's all my fault. If I hadn't taken on that project, if I hadn't offended them, if I hadn't hidden, Grace wouldn't have died. It's me who should have died. Ethan collapsed to the ground, crying uncontrollably. All the emotions he'd suppressed for 10 years pouring out. I sympathized with Grace, but that didn't mean I could forgive Ethan. When he had cried enough, I handed him a tissue and spoke up. What happened between you and her is your own matter. You owe her an apology, and you could spend 1,000 ways to atone for your mistakes. But the one thing you should never have done is to choose the worst path, forcing me to pay for your mistakes. You shouldn't have sacrificed my happiness to atone for your regrets. Ethan, it's over. We can't go back. I didn't notice when Nathan had stood behind me, but he awkwardly patted my shoulder. Are you okay? I shook my head, turned with him, and we went upstairs without looking back. Not long after we got back to the courtyard from Sophie's house, Ethan and Lucas appeared in front of me again. Olivia, give me one last chance. Let's start over, okay? After hearing what you said that day, I realized how wrong I was. I finally understand my feelings. I love you. You are the only one in my heart. I want to give you a grand wedding and let the whole world know you're my wife. Ethan knelt at the gate of the courtyard, holding a bouquet of roses. The crowd began to gather, and I had no choice but to pull him inside. What exactly are you doing? I don't need your wedding, and I don't need you to announce anything to the world. It doesn't matter anymore, do you understand? And whether you love me or not is none of my concern. I don't love you anymore, Ethan. When he heard this, he nearly stumbled and almost lost his balance. Lucas spoke up first. Mom, Dad bought the house next door. From now on, we'll all live together and never be apart again. My temper flared up like wildfire. That's enough. Ethan, I know you have the resources to find out where I am and the means to buy countless small courtyards, I said, my voice trembling with anger. But you can't buy my heart, nor can you purchase my happiness. I am a person, not an object. I continued, my words sharp and unyielding. I'm not some toy that you and your son can praise when you're happy and toss aside when you're not. I have dignity. I have dreams. But tell me, have you ever given me those things? Even once. Lucas had never seen me this furious before. Startled, he clung tightly to Ethan's side, peeking out at me timidly. Ethan, on the other hand, gazed at me as if I were a stranger, his eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and regret. I'm sorry, Olivia. I didn't realize my coldness had hurt you so deeply. But I truly love you, he stammered, his voice cracking with emotion. How many times did I need to say it before he would understand? I let out a weary sigh, feeling the weight of our broken past pressing down on me. Ethan, I don't love you anymore, I said, my tone softer now but resolute. And Grace. Grace is the unbridgeable chasm between us. Let me go. He opened his mouth as if to say more, but before he could speak, Nathan's voice called out from behind me. Olivia, quick, give me a hand. Sophie's slipping out of my arms. I turned to see Nathan juggling several large bags in one hand while trying to steady Sophie with the other. Mama! Mama! I want Mama to hold me. Sophie squealed, wriggling excitedly as soon as she spotted me. I broke into a warm smile, jogging over to take her into my arms. What are you doing here today? I asked Nathan, my tone light and teasing. Weren't you supposed to wait a few more days for your leave? Nathan shot a wary glance at Ethan and Lucas, then turned back to me with a sheepish grin. Sophie couldn't wait. She insisted on coming today. Look, we even brought you all this. Sophie said you'd love it. I looked at the bags he carried, my heart softening. Over the years, I'd known every dish Ethan and Lucas loved, but they had never bothered to learn my preferences. They didn't even know I was allergic to roses, despite their constant proclamations of love. Nathan and Sophie, on the other hand, had only been in my life for a few months, yet they knew me better than Ethan ever had. What a cruel irony. Holding Sophie close, I walked past Ethan and Lucas without so much as a glance. Nathan followed behind me, his steps steady and sure. Come on in and wash up, I called over my shoulder. Look at the two of you. You're as muddy as if you'd rolled around in a field. Sophie, visiting the courtyard for the first time, chattered away like a little bird, her excitement infectious. Behind us, the father and son duo stood in silence, their figures lonely and forlorn. On the ground, a bouquet of roses lay trampled and forgotten. A year later, Nathan and I held a unique wedding ceremony. We hosted a simple banquet in the courtyard, inviting our neighbors to celebrate with us. Beneath the trees filled with flowers and fruit, we bowed to the heavens and the earth, marking the start of our new life together. 2 months prior, Nathan and Sophie had moved from the neighboring city to the courtyard to be with me. Together, we spent our days watching sunrises and sunsets, marveling at the cycles of blooming and withering. It was a life I had once dared not even dream of. I silently thanked the version of myself from a year ago, the one who had found the courage to take that first step. It was that choice that had led me to Nathan and Sophie. After the wedding, as I was tidying up, I found an envelope tucked away in a corner of the courtyard. Olivia, it began. Seeing the smile on your face, I know I've lost the most precious treasure in the world. I'm sorry for never recognizing my true feelings, for thinking of you as just a partner in my life, and not as the love of my life. But now it's too late to say these things. I know I've lost you forever, and I'm sorry. I want to make it up to you. Enclosed are the transfer agreements for 50% of my company's shares, the deed to the villa in the eastern suburbs of City A, and the purchase agreement for the courtyard next to yours. I've already put your name on everything and had it notarized. It's all I can do now. I just hope you live a life free of worry and full of happiness. I stared at the letter for a long moment, my emotions a tangle of disbelief and resignation. Then, without hesitation, I handed it to Nathan. Send these back tomorrow, I said firmly. I don't want any of it. Nathan chuckled, his voice warm and teasing. Whatever you say, dear. Your wish is my command. Later, a mutual friend told me news about Ethan and Lucas. Lucas had gone abroad for his studies, leaving his father behind. They rarely spoke, except when Lucas needed money. Our friend mentioned that Lucas resented Ethan, blaming him for growing up without a mother because of me. Ethan had retreated further into himself after my wedding. Apart from going to the office, he didn't go anywhere else. In just 1 year, he seemed to have aged a decade. His hair had turned gray, and his eyes were hollow. He spent hours staring at my old photographs, lost in his memories. I smiled faintly at the news, offering no comment. It was all in the past now. That night I had a dream. In the dream I was 19 again. My parents had just died in a car accident, leaving me alone in a world that felt unbearably cold. My grandmother fell gravely ill, and I brought her to City A for treatment. The same events played out as before. I had nowhere to turn and I broke down in tears, crouched on the cold, hard ground. A large, steady hand reached out to me. I've already paid for the medical expenses, Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. Would you like to be my personal assistant? If so, take my hand and stand up. I stared at his hand, then at his familiar yet distant face. Wiping away my tears, I stood up on my own. Thank you, I said, meeting his gaze. But I don't want to. I'll work hard to pay you back. Just give me your account number, and let's not see each other again. His eyes filled with shock and disbelief as I turned away, walking back toward my grandmother's hospital room. Behind me, his voice rang out, low and filled with sorrow. Olivia, you still won't forgive me, will you?